The LA Clippers' old friend and arguably the greatest Clipper of all time, Chris Paul, was waived by the Phoenix Suns earlier this week, which gets everyone talking, as you know. Could Chris Paul be making a return to the Clippers? What would it take to get him? Should the Clippers even try to get him? And what's the likelihood of it happening? Gonna be talking about it all on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri. Just finished my 18th season as a Clipper fan. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod and subscribe to my very own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA sports, NBA, and NBA history content. And of course, Locked On Clippers is free and available on all your favorite podcasting platforms, including YouTube, where I want you to tell me what you think of a potential CP3 reunion. Are you against it? Are you for it? How much would you prefer CP3 over Russ, or would you rather have Russ? Tell me all of your thoughts in the comments. And today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs is the best leg wear around. But anyway, let's start out with just my initial reaction to things, right? CP3. Whew. Okay, I'm going to be real. Chris Paul is pretty cooked. I said before the Suns series that I thought he was the third best player in the series. The fourth best player in the series after KD, Booker, and Kawhi, in whatever order you want to put those three in. I said he was better than Russ. I was proven very wrong. Russ is clearly better. So the fact of the matter is, I would rather keep Russell Westbrook. Out of the two older point guards, Westbrook and CP3, two future Hall of Famers, I'm going with Russ right now. So if we can keep Russ, no need for CP3. Now, we don't need a backup point guard because I'm pretty sure Bones Highland will be accepting that role very gladly next season, and I think it's good to have youth. And that brings me into the main thing. What did the Clippers lack this season, or the last couple of seasons in the 2-1-3 era? Guys that can get downhill and push the pace. Chris Paul does the exact opposite. We know it better than anyone. And even though we played faster pace, we were a faster paced team relative to Chris Paul's career that he's played on with Lob City, he is no longer that guy. We don't have that run and gun personnel. We don't turn defense into offense that quickly anymore. Right now, CP3, when we play the Suns, you see it, he completely slows down their pace. With Cameron Payne, these two of the last three playoffs, 2021 and 2023, they have looked better with Cameron Payne on the floor than CP3 because he really slows things down. He takes the ball out of Booker and KD's hands. Before KD, it was fine, having it in Chris Paul's hands, but it didn't seem like Ayton was developing at all. And CP3 is still fantastic in the pick and roll. He's still great at getting into the mid-range. He averaged 14 points, 9 assists this year, and his catch and shoot three ball is something he's clearly put in work on. So as far as catch and shoot threes, he would be an upgrade over Russ. And decision-making, in my opinion, he would be an upgrade over Russ. He does not turn the ball over as much. But his biggest flaw is when teams switch everything, he cannot get to the basket the same way. He was never the greatest one-on-one player, even though he was always, in my opinion, in his prime, a bit underrated in that respect. People didn't know that when it was time to get a bucket, CP3 could still, for the most part, get a bucket. But not just not at the championship level, not as the number one scorer in crunch time on your team to win a championship. That was just asking a lot of a 6-foot guard whose best attribute was not even scoring. So when he's seeing the best defenders in the world at the time, it was hard for him to get off clean looks. But now, you saw it in the Dallas series, and you saw it with Milwaukee in the finals. They switch everything on Chris Paul, and teams love to do that on the Clippers. And then where does he go? The best he can do is be a spot-up shooter. And then, so moral of the story, the Clippers need youth athleticism and guys that can get downhill. Chris Paul does not cross any of those boxes. What he does cross is the traditional point guard thing that people have been begging for years. Somebody get the ball to Kawhi and Paul George in their spots, make life easier for them, and accept ball handling duties. Well, Chris Paul can do all that, but we already have Westbrook that seemed to do that very well. Now, if you're very anti-Westbrook, and you think CP3 is so much smarter, I would much rather have Chris Paul because, I trust him with the ball in his hands more. He's a better shooter from all three levels, besides the first one, really, mid-range and three ball. That's your argument. But for me, Russell Westbrook did his role pretty well, and he gives us something that Chris Paul doesn't have. CP3 is, in my opinion, people are harsh on him defensively right now. They act like he's a cone because Patrick Beverley said what he said, and against Dallas, he was the weakest link when he had Ayton, Bridges, Booker, and Cameron Johnson on the court or Jay Crowder on the court. Of course, an old Chris Paul is going to be the weak link there. But in my opinion, he still has good instincts, good hands, and he's smart defensively. In the regular season, I don't know how much worse he is defensively than Russ. But in the playoffs, Russ was far better defensively. So overall, my thing is I would rather have Russ. I don't think that Chris Paul checks off any of the boxes that the Clippers lack. In fact, he has exactly what we don't need. He does have experience, and he does have that vocal leadership. But then again, CP3 is not the easiest person to work with. We've seen several players come out and say they're not a fan of playing with him. They're not a fan of his leadership style. And quite frankly, even though Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook had their little breakup, almost everyone that plays with Russ speaks glowingly about him. He doesn't have guys going on Colin Cowherd like Glenn Big Baby Davis saying that Chris Paul doesn't know how to talk to people. And by the way, CP3, that's not the only person that has criticized him like that. It's very clear that certain players, like for example, I don't think Ayton likes him anymore. It seems very evident that he doesn't like him. I also heard, Glenn Rivers didn't like Chris Paul. Blake Griffin, I know for a fact, didn't like Chris Paul. So it's not like CP3 is the easiest person to work with. And then Law Murray had a tweet yesterday that when everybody was giving their tribulations about Russ and the Lakers and how happy they were to have him on the Clippers, he said, these are these exact words in the tweet. When Russell Westbrook was going through his Laker tribulations, the support he had from the Clippers locker room was quite widespread, both before and during his Utah Jazz purgatory. Let's just say that the locker room doesn't speak on Chris Paul the same way for what it's worth. Anyways, so there you go. It seems like the locker room isn't as fond of Chris Paul. So besides the fact that he doesn't check off any of the boxes from a playing perspective, really, the only boxes he checks off are the floor general, guy that wants the ball in his hands, good decision maker, and he's better at spot up threes than Russ. But other than that, he doesn't give us anything that we don't have. He makes us older and slower. And then the biggest thing I haven't even mentioned, injury prone. The guy is, come on, we know this better than anyone. He's injury prone and he's 38 years old? So, I don't know. For me, it doesn't seem like the move. But, I'm not going to lie, there is a feel-good story in there. There is. And I want to give you a reason why I honestly would want Chris Paul back. If we can't get Russ. Going to be talking about all that coming up. But before I do that, I got to tell you about Bird Dogs, the best leg wear around. Not only do they make you look good, they're extremely comfortable. Bird Dog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than the regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dogs uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA and enter the promo code LockedOnNBA for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Woo! All right. Okay, I have to confess. If we don't get Russ back, I'd want Chris Paul. Even though everything I said in the first segment is valid, I'm not going to lie, guys. Unlike a lot of Clipper fans, I still have a lot of love for Chris Paul. Do his antics annoy me? They sure do. Do I think he's overrated on an all-time scale? I sure do. Do I think he was ever fit to be the best player on a championship team, even in his prime? No, I do not. But I'll tell you what, he changed this organization. He bled red, white, and blue, and he really cared. He left because he didn't want to be with Glenn Rivers anymore, and Blake Griffin was always injured. Not to say he wasn't, but that last year when Chris was playing amazing against Utah, dragging us to Game 7 without Blake, I said if Chris Paul wants to leave and go be a second option somewhere else, I don't blame him. That's exactly what he did. He realized that he had to be a second option. So he went and played with James Harden for 2 years. Then he spent 1 year in OKC, which was obviously a year he was never going to win the championship, but he still sucked it up and played out his contract. Then he went to Phoenix and was the second option to Devin Booker, and then the third option to KD and Devin Booker. Look, I've said many times on my own show, I don't want Chris Paul to win a championship before the Clippers do. It's almost like, and I think this is an insane comparison, but it's almost like when you break up with someone. I mean, I wish them the best in life, but I want to find love again before they do. So then I don't care if they find someone. If I see them with someone before I do, that hurts me. It feels like I wasn't good enough and they were too good for me. And that's how I feel about Chris Paul. As crazy as that sounds, I can't believe I'm relating it to dating. But for real, I don't want to see him happy before we're happy. He made it to the finals before us. Okay. That you get a prize for that? You get a Western Conference Finals trophy. Good for you. I guarantee you Chris Paul still wants that championship trophy. Now, there's a possibility he could try to go to the Lakers, hang out with his boy LeBron, and build the banana boat squad and put it together. LeBron's played with everyone else except for Chris. But this is Locked On Clippers, not Locked On Lakers. My thing is this. Here's the honest truth. I don't believe in this 2-on-3 era. I don't believe in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George winning a championship together. They're too injury prone. So you know what? Might as well double down and bring back a player I like that's injury prone, another injury prone star. Why not? Bring back Chris Paul because you know what? I'm going to have so much fun rooting for them. It would be a feel-good story because here's what's going to happen. Either they all get injured and we lose again, which is very likely with or without Chris Paul, or we bring him back. He helps our team. We make it to the conference finals with Chris, or even the second round with Chris again, with Kawhi and Paul. And it's like a dream come true. Because look, man, I get it. Chris Paul can be a dirty bastard, but he was our dirty bastard. And he had his best years with us, no matter what anyone says. Those were some of the best memories of my life. As a kid growing up playing point guard, we finally got not just a great point guard. Like Sam Cassell was awesome. Baron Davis was washed, but he was awesome sometimes. We got one of the best point guards of all time in their prime. And that meant a lot to me. And I didn't even like Chris Paul that much before he came. I was a Darren Williams fan. I wore number 8 in elementary school because of D. Will. But then I got to mimic and watch Chris Paul every single night and see the way he changed our franchise. And look, I get it. It's not the same Chris Paul. But it is the same human being, Chris Paul. And that means a lot to me. And I love Russell Westbrook. I want Russell Westbrook back. But if we can't get Russ back, I would absolutely want to have Chris Paul back, man. Because if we're going to run it back, if we're going to rebuild, then no Chris Paul. But if we're going to run it back with Kawhi and Paul, I'm okay with it. I think he would actually work really well with them. But it depends if they want him, of course. As I said, he's not the easiest person to deal with. But, man, I would just be so happy to see Chris back in red, white, and blue. And I'm not going to lie, when they were on the team, I liked Chris Paul more than Paul or Kawhi. He was more available, which is crazy to say because he was injured a lot. He was more available. I think he had more big playoff moments. You can argue that the biggest playoff moment that Paul George has was bigger than any of Chris Paul's, but I watched this guy limp us to a Game 7 win against a defending champion Spurs team that had Kawhi Leonard and Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker and Greg Popovich on it. Those memories stick with you for life. And yeah, mainly it's not basketball related why I would want Chris Paul back. It's all nostalgia and fandom. It really is. It's because I loved Chris Paul. And I still will always have that love for him, no matter what anyone says. That's my reasoning. I just would love to root for him again. It would be great to have, he would be back to being my favorite player again. Because it's just the memories are too powerful. Lob City meant more to me than this. It really did. Yeah, I'm covering the team now, and this is awesome. And I get to go to even more games, but 6 straight years of the playoffs, I went to almost every single home playoff game of their run together. All but about 9, I want to say. 19 out of 28, I think is the number of Lob City playoff games I attended. And that just means a lot for me. and I'm a point guard. And I love, again, same thing with Russ, how he has passion, he has emotion, I can tell how badly he wants to win. Chris Paul is the same. We saw it for 6 years. He cares so much, and that's why I would love to have him if we don't get Russ back. But coming up, going to be talking about the likelihood of everything, what actually has to happen for us financially to get him. And, there was a part of the article that Shams released that says that he may not even be going anywhere. I'll tell you what I'm talking about coming up. But before I do that, I got to tell you about FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. I love FanDuel. You can see that it's not just me that loves FanDuel. Everybody seems to love FanDuel. If you watch the NBA playoffs on Inside the NBA or on TNT this year, you saw that Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, all of them were doing their FanDuel picks. So get on the wave and the bandwagon. There's no better place to bet of all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right. So the likelihood of us actually getting Chris Paul is not very high, and I will tell you why. So here's Shams' article. He says that the Suns and Chris Paul are exploring multiple options. So they waived him because they don't want to pay him that contract that he was owed. I think he's still owed about $15 million, but that contract was hefty, and they don't want to pay that. So they want to try to negotiate something new. They said including a trade, stretching his contract, or waiving and re-signing him in free agency for a smaller deal. Stretching his contract would mean the current contract he's on, I believe, over more years, but maybe smaller increments throughout the years. But anyway, there'll be trade discussions and everything. So let's just say they waive him and let him walk, which I kind of doubt at that point. The Clippers, again, we're over the second tax apron, so we can't get him on the mid-level exception. We can't have that. We would need to shed salary. Russ would likely have to walk, and then we bring him in on a team-friendly deal, which I don't know if he'd even agree to. Would he sign for a vet minimum? No chance. So to me, it would have to be a smaller deal, giving up other players. Now, in a trade, I don't think there's many players I would trade for him unless it's like Nico Batum. I wouldn't even do that unless we lost Russ. Marcus Morris, sure, but it just sounds unlikely, in my opinion, financially to get Chris Paul. Apparently, he wants to stay in Phoenix and play with Booker and KD, but they would have to find a team-friendly deal, and it depends. Does Frank Vogel even want Chris Paul? That's something that we have to consider. He's a new coach. Maybe he doesn't want that age. Because CP3 slows things down and he's not really comfortable in a spot-up shooting role. And quite frankly, he would probably be in that same spot-up shooting role with us. However, we have a star that's come out and said straight up that he doesn't want to play in the point guard so much. Whereas Booker and KD don't really say that. So that's why it's kind of more okay with us than it is with them. But I still think Chris Paul could be decent for Phoenix. I don't know. It feels like their roster can play faster and CP3 slows them down, whereas we just are slower. Point blank. But I don't know. If the Lakers don't re-sign D'Angelo Russell, I think they will have the cap space to sign him to a deal that's probably very in his price range. So, and of his expectations. So, I don't know. I think the likelihood of him coming to the Clippers, just given the cap situation, is pretty unlikely. But again, do I think we need him from a basketball perspective? No, I don't think so. I think he's too slow and cannot get to the basket the same way he used to. He was never even the best at that in his prime, but he's just older, and we don't need that. And he's not available enough. At the end of the day, we'll probably end up seeing a playoffs with all three of them out. So I can't have that. But am I for it? You damn right I'm for it. Because I'm a fan, and I don't believe in this team. So I might as well just get players that I like, that I have good memories with, right? Bring on Blake on the bench for the vibes. Why not? If he's going to be a cheerleader on the bench, third string, might as well be here doing it. Anyway, that's it for me today, guys. Let me know what you think. Chris Paul back to the Clippers. I think there'll be a resounding no from everybody. Of course, I want to keep Russ. I can't wait till this all starts shaking because I just want to keep learning more about the CBA and all that stuff. And just when the rumors really start, that's when the episodes are going to keep on cranking out with even more fire in them. But you can follow me if you want to hear me talk about what's going on in the NBA right now on Dime Dropper Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod, and of course, subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more content. And of course, you got to subscribe to Locked On Clippers and hit the notification bell. Tell all your fellow Clipper fans we're the only 5-day-a-week Clipper podcast, and I try my best to do the best I can for you guys, give you the latest Clipper news, rumors, and content. Thank you so much for joining me. The age-old proverb continues: Go Clippers.